Okay, welcome to the final part of this series looking at knight f3, f6 and the moves d4 and e4. So in this video I'm going to be finishing up looking at the main line. So that goes after the moves d5, knight c3, b5 and e4. Now in this position I'm going to be recommending the move knight h6. So this move. I did think for a while it was possible to play bishop g4 here. I thought it was kind of like a solid alternative, but in actual fact I think this move is quite bad for black. The reason is that white can take on d5, so threatening to bring the knight to d5, and the way that black really wants to stop white from doing that is to play e6, so helping the development of this bishop on f8. But white has a very strong move here with bishop f4, and the point of this is that if black takes on f3, then knight d5, and this knight can't be taken because of queen e2 winning for white. So black's in quite a lot of trouble after knight d5, and black has some alternatives to bishop takes f3, but none of them are particularly good. I think I tried in one game, I ended up in this position against Onyebenze, and I tried bishop f5. But here, if white plays just bishop d3, the simple move, then I think white's doing very, very well. So this whole bishop g4 line I think is quite bad. But knight h6 is the kind of standard counter-attacking idea for black. And here I think it's a good move. What I'm going to take as the main move here is the move g4. One thing to mention first of all is that if white takes this, not a critical move at all really, bishop takes h6, black is doing very well now with bishop g4. So we saw in that line a minute ago that white had this kind of tactic with bishop f4, but that's no longer an option, and black can simply play e6 and he's doing very well. White's given away the dark squared bishop, so it could be that move like g6 and bishop h6 could be a threat in the future, and basically I think black's ready for choice. So bishop takes h6 isn't particularly good. The other alternative that white has, which is fairly dangerous, is to move knight to e5. So against this, taking on e4 is a very bad move because of knight comes into d5, and therefore the key move for black is knight to g4. So you're now hitting f2 and the knight on e5. White can take this, which will then transpose into a variation of the exchange line, which we analysed in an earlier video. On the other hand, most people that use this move order will probably play the move f4. It's kind of an aggressive option. I've seen some strong players play this. Actually, I've seen Yuki Mix play it a few times. And black should really take this knight with the pawn. It's already quite easy to go wrong. I've seen some strong players play this line with knight e3, hoping just to kind of keep the position simple and try and play a solid line. However, I think white's doing quite well here. In fact, I think white's got quite a good initiative. He's going to be taking on taking with the pawn on d5 with the pawn on e4, and has very good chances of an attack. So I think taking this knight with the f6 pawn is the best way to go, but it does, obviously it opens up the f file and means that white's kind of obvious way to attack now with f5 looks quite dangerous. I think black has to be very careful actually here. I mean, I think there are actually a few options, but I think the best one is e6. And the reason for this is that it seems like white has a few kind of tactics. One thing to point out is that if white, for example, black played e5, one of the key tactics for white in this position is to play bishop g5, and in this case it would actually win the game, because you're attacking this queen on f6, the queen on d8, and if bishop takes f5, queen g4, threatening to invade, and black can seemingly stop it by exchanging the queens, but then bishop h3, and the rook's coming to f1 with a win for white. But if white tries for the similar thing after the move e6, it doesn't work at all, because now you're now attacking f5 with the pawn, and now this bishop on c8 is covering that queen attack with stopping queen g4. And basically without that white hasn't really got anything. You can try exchanging the queens, maybe queen here, but then queen f6, a key move. So often you'll see this idea. It's more important to kind of get the extra tempo than it is to get the material. So white can take this extra pawn, put bishop h6. Black's just too fast now, he's getting to the f-file first, which is the most important thing. So bishop g5 isn't very good. f6 looks like another kind of dangerous option, but again it's black that really benefits from this f-file more than white does. White can now try bishop g5, looks like the natural follow-up, but once again queen f6, just basically that tempo is the most important thing. And this queen can't even be taken because of knight g3, winning by attacking f1 and d1. Even without that, I think bishop h6 here would be very strong as well. So white has to be a bit more careful. One option that white can maybe think about doing is playing bishop takes b5. Sometimes this idea is not as wacky as it looks, because you're basically gaining a tempo by removing the bishop from f1, because now the rook can come to f1 much faster, and you're also, by removing this pawn on b5, threatening knight to b5. However, for tactical reasons, I don't think it's as good here. Bishop b4. Now, if white plays slowly and maybe puts a rook on f1, black will have time to get castled and probably have the better chances. So bishop g5, basically forcing or hoping to force white to play e takes f5. But again, black has a very strong move. Queen f6 yet again is really good here. Now, if white opens up the f-file, then black castles, and he's the fastest, so he's going to basically be winning along the f-file. And if white takes this bishop on f6, you notice that white's basically been giving away quite a lot of material. Black already has 3 pieces for the queen, and after bishop a6, I think this bishop's getting into position, and basically this really strong light squared bishop and the knight on g4 give black really great play. I think black's doing very well. So bishop takes b5 I don't think is very dangerous. And one final option that white could try here, which I've got down as my main line, is to move e5. Now the point of this is that white can now bring the queen to f3 sometimes, but previously the pawn on e4 was under pressure, so white could never really put a queen on f3 after, say, the f-file opens up, but now he can, so black has to be perhaps a little more careful. I quite like the idea, which we've seen it before in some of these lines, to quickly develop this bishop from f8, so just immediately getting castled. Remember that white did sacrifice a piece, so by giving back this bishop, the material is simply level now, but black can castle, and now he's got lots of ideas of opening up the f-file with a very strong attack, and I like black, a good counterplay here. Okay, so we're back up. So that was the knight e5 line. Probably the more ambitious line is to play g4. This is basically the move that's been played by very strong players. Onya Benze has played this move a lot, including against me. He's won a few games against me in this variation. So I've basically had to analyse it quite a lot, just to be ready in case I don't particularly like getting beaten up in a line over and over again. And here, I think far and away the best move for black is to play bishop takes g4. The reason for this is that after taking this pawn, black is actually gaining a tempo because of a threat of knight takes g4. If black takes it with the knight, then white's under less pressure and can immediately play e takes d5 with really good attack. Black doesn't, well, I think black does really have to take that pawn. If black tries something else, let's say e5, then again e takes d5 is very, very strong. The move e6 I've played a few times, however I don't think it's quite sound. The move is basically aimed against e takes d5, so e takes d5 is less strong because now the bishop can come out to d6 in response to that. However, white does have another idea, which is this move knight g5. The point of this is that this knight can no longer be captured because black's blocked in both the c8 bishop and the queen by playing these pawns to e6 and f6, and the move bishop h6 here is really nasty. This obviously can't be taken because of queen h5. Black, well, when I've played e6 I've known this to be the case, however you're kind of hoping to raise the stakes a little bit and play f5, which is kind of like a counter tactic. Now white cannot. This knight is basically pinned. Well, essentially pinned, because if it jumps or takes on h7, then the queen can come out to h4. But again, there's another twist in the tail here, in that white plays the move rook g1. So not immediately jumping with the knight, but now white really is threatening to play knight f7 or knight takes h7, because after queen h4 the rook comes to g3, and therefore I think white's doing really well here. Black's best bet is probably to play f takes g4, and I think the simplest way here, bishop g5 can be considered, and queen f6 is an interesting line. I think the simplest is to play queen h5, queen g5, and then bishop g5, and white basically has far better development and a good initiative, and I wouldn't want to play this line as black, so I can't really recommend that. So bishop takes g4, that's the move I'm going to be looking at for the remainder of this video. Immediately threatening to jump in with the knight to g4, so the best move for white is to play h3. If, as usual, taking this knight with the bishop is not really very ambitious and not particularly strong, black can even play e5 here. It looks a bit risky because of the weakened light squares, but it can be played. Also e6, more natural move, is quite sensible as well. And there are basically black can continue, say e takes d5, it looks natural, c6, just stopping the knight from jumping to d5, and now black has ideas of playing maybe f5, opening up the queen, or perhaps b4, attacking that knight on c3, and it's just an interesting game. Black certainly doesn't have the worst chances. The more ambitious move, and the move that is generally played here, is h3, so keeping the more pieces on the board, and now the e takes d5 move will be a little bit stronger, but there'll be extra ideas with the dark squared bishop. And here I like the move e6. Now I've seen e5 played sometimes here, but I think it doesn't really make much sense to give away the light squared bishop and then weaken the light squares on the next move. I think the e6 move is more natural and also objectively better as well. And this, I guess, is probably really like the tabia for this variation, the first kind of starting position. And the move that's generally always played here is the move e takes d5. However, I think white does have a second very interesting option, which is rook g1. And I'll look at this later. The idea is basically to avoid the line that black plays against e takes d5, the move I'm going to recommend. And the move I recommend after e takes d5 is to play knight f5. And already you can see that black's getting some counterplay here with this knight. The knight's threatening to come into h4. And if white perhaps plays a little bit too cagey with h4, just trying to prevent any kind of counterplay, it really doesn't work very well, because another kind of star move in this position for black is to move queen d6. And this hasn't been played actually, this idea of queen d6, not that I've seen in my database anyway, but the idea is very good here, because basically black's threatening first of all to play knight e3, which would immediately win the game, because bishop takes e3 would then be met by queen f4 with a winning game. So say white just plays a silly move, knight e4, attacking d1 and f1, bishop takes, queen f4 with a win for black. So instead white should try something else. The moves that I've seen tried here are bishop f4 has been played, and then knight e3, again just forcing this bishop to capture back. And now in the game on Nubenze against Molten Thinker, the game continued f5 with an interesting position. Also possible is the move c6, I quite like this move, stopping the knight from coming to d5 in a different way. And now if d4 then b4. And black's threatening, well, not a threat, but he is planning on bringing this bishop out to c5, really playing along these dark squares. And if white pushes his pawn to d6, then queen b6 is very strong. Well, it's winning really there. So say knight e4, bishop c5, let's say takes, and the queen's now threatening to come to h5, so g6. And remember that white did sacrifice a pawn on g4 earlier. I mean, if white still had a pawn on g2, then this position would be better for white because he'd have the initiative with his pawn on d5. But he has sacrificed a pawn for it, so the position's probably quite unclear. I think white has compensation, but certainly not more than that. Okay, let's back up. So that was bishop f4, so that was played in one game. Against other moves, again, queen d6 I really like. Bishop h6 was played in one game by Gran Lapin against Molten Thinker. And again here, queen d6. Oh, not queen d5, queen d6. And black's threatening knight takes d4, knight g3, knight e3. And this bishop obviously can't take this pawn because queen f4 will simply win for black. So against other moves, bishop g5 will be answered by queen d6. The I guess d5 has to be considered, but then knight d4 shows another idea of this knight. And basically, I just think this queen d6 idea, just gives black really good counterplay. So that's quite a new idea. I haven't seen it tested, haven't had a chance to test it myself, but I think it looks quite good. Gives black good chances. The idea I had was of rook g1, which I haven't seen played, as I said before, is that after g6, which is necessary to defend this g7 pawn, e takes d5. Now the move knight f5 isn't actually possible. The reason for that is that white basically crunches through with rook takes g6, threatening queen h5, and after that's defended, knight d5 with a winning position for white. So black has to come up with a different idea than knight f5. And I spent some time analysing. I've analysed the move knight c6 quite a lot. It's quite a complicated move. I think gives black a good game, but there are lots of lines there. The move I'm going to recommend hopefully will be easy to remember because it's basically has similar ideas to the previous variation, which is just playing the move queen d6 immediately. So in some cases the knight will be able to jump to f5 in the future, but this move is particularly good here against rook g1 because the queen is actually threatening to come to h2. So for example, the first move that springs to my mind for white here is knight d5. This move has to be considered, and fortunately queen h2 here is completely adequate for black. If white blocks the attack on f2 with the bishop, then knight g4 is too strong. This can't be captured because of queen h4 with a win for black. So instead rook g2, and this allows black to zigzag the queen, say queen h1, bring the queen to e4, and then after it's blocked, win a piece with queen f3. And so after this gets taken, basically black is quite a lot of material up. White does have this annoying knight on d5, which I don't recommend black takes that because then the white's options along the e file could be quite dangerous. But instead, an option for black is to play knight g4 followed by h5. This is possible as well because black is basically 2 pawns up now. These g and h pawns are extra, so this knight on d5 isn't necessarily well. I think it's an interesting position. Black has the extra material, white has a strong knight, but I think certainly black is not worse here. So instead of knight d5, another option is just to block this queen in by playing the move f4. So this stops any kind of funny business with this queen. And again, so knight f5 still isn't really possible because of this idea rook takes g6 followed by knight d5. So here I like the move knight c6. So now black is threatening to play knight takes d4. That's the immediate threat, and white has to deal with that somehow. And so by taking on b5, white has two options to take on b5. If we look first at bishop takes b5, now black can play knight f5. This is quite an important point because now if the c3 knight actually moves, then the idea of moving the queen is quite annoying for white. So let's say for example white takes this, threatening queen h5, h5, knight d5, this queen can now come over to a6. And if the knight jumps to b5, then the queen can instead maneuver like this into c4. So by taking away that pawn on b5, it actually gives black's queen more kind of ideas and ways to counter the knight on c3. And if white takes with a knight on b5, black should probably take a move out to block this bishop b5 check. But black now again is threatening to play knight f5 with good counterplay. And another option that can come in some positions is to move queen d5. Maybe not immediately, but in some positions this weakened diagonal and threatens to come to e4 and f3 can be annoying. Also, if this light square bishop ever goes off somewhere, then queen b4 can also be quite an annoying resource for white to deal with. So that's it really. So I think these lines are basically quite unexplored. These lines of queen d6, quite an interesting new idea, worth further exploration in my opinion, and should give black good chances of getting at least adequate counterplay against white's quite aggressive setup. This is the final video looking at the move 2d4 and 2e4. The next video will probably start looking at the move 2 knight c3, which is a very complicated variation, lots of options for both sides in that. So that will probably take a few videos as well. So I hope you come back for those, and thanks for watching.